Ever wonder what really happens when professional women hit midlife? Spoiler alert, it's not all hot flashes and weighted vests. In this episode, Ashleigh Tobin, a registered nurse, certified mind coach, unapologetic health advocate, and TEDx speaker, gets real and a little hilarious about perimenopause, menopause, and the transformative power of embracing life's big change, at work and beyond. Whether you're living it, leading it, or loving someone through it, tune in for some myth busting, a little camaraderie, and a reminder that self care is way more than spa days. Alrighty, everybody. So, the topic that I know at least 50% of people out there listening are going to be so excited to talk about. I have a guest who is doing some revolutionary work for our female leaders in specific regards to perimenopause and menopause. And men, before you turn this off and say this is not for me, I highly recommend you keep listening because we are going to talk about this in a way that is so meaningful that you will look at your female peers and colleagues in a different way after this talk. So stay with us. So let's get into this. Miss Ashleigh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm going to address that very thing about that perhaps this is for the gals only.
Mm-hmm.
The phrase that I often use when I'm speaking with organizations or corporates is, if you are not that woman, you know her.
Mm-hmm.
She's a partner, a leader, a colleague, a sister, a mother, a friend. And her lived experience really matters. And knowing even the smallest amount about this particular topic, and it's a big topic, will help her and be an incredible ally for her.
Well, and ultimately what we're trying to do is help everyone out there understand what it means to be a leader, right? And so regardless if you're male or female, you're going to encounter women in your workplace. And guess what? Every single woman is going to go through this life change. And today we're going to really talk about what this change means for the workplace. What does it mean for our female leaders? How does it affect you? Because too often, or shall I say, in the past, I was just telling Ashleigh this before we hit record, that I feel like our generation, so I'm talking primarily maybe Gen X, because I'm Gen X, I feel like we are blowing the lid off of perimenopause and menopause in a way that I have not seen in prior generations, at least here in the US, because I know you're over there in Ireland, which I'm a little jealous. I still need to get over and visit. But particularly here, we are like making a lot of noise about what this is, and trying to drive awareness around it. I can't tell you how many text streams and text chats I'm on are like, has anybody else experienced this thing? Or, oh my God, today I have brain fog. I've never had this before. I feel like I'm crazy. I cannot keep my thoughts straight. And I love that we're doing that, but I also want to talk about like how this is shifting things, because definitely it's not the same as it was 20 years ago.
It has changed phenomenally. When I consider the landscape here in Ireland and in the UK, even 8 years ago, perhaps even 6 years ago, when I was speaking with organizations about different health topics, there were only a brave few who actually were interested in having conversations about perimenopause, menopause, or hormonal health. And invariably, they'd be terrified. What would happen if we had this discussion at work?
Mm-hmm.
Because way back then, this natural transition period was kept a secret, and most secrets tend to generate around them shame, and therefore no one really wants to talk about it. in the work that I've been doing for over 20 years, I've been working with women, and I have seen the narrative shift from whispers of, I think I might be going through the change, to actually, I'm in my early 40s and I've noticed these symptoms. I wonder if perhaps it's perimenopause. And that's phenomenal to see. And that has happened primarily because we have, over the last 5 years in particular, had a lot more open discussion about what is a normal health chapter in every woman's life. I'm going to say it brings with it some tricky situations too, however, because although generally speaking, there's more conversation about hormones and perimenopause and menopause and what it is, it can also raise some of the ugly factors, which are the fear that perhaps if I mention that I'm of a certain age, or that if I mention menopause at work, does that mean, I get that label of being too old?
Mhm.
Or, oh, well, it's only her hormones. Or she's very cranky today. She mustn't have taken her pills. And although that is happening so much less here in Ireland and the UK, it really isn't tolerated at all now. There certainly was, as this conversation happened, um, much more awareness that this bias exists.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing. And so it's important that we have clear education, honest conversations, and that the conversations are primarily delivered in such a way that we can resource men and women in the work situation to actually deliver at their peak. The end, whatever is needed to do that. So it needs to be, I'm going to say, managed in a very particular and I would say healthy and progressive way.
What do you think led the change of that? So as we talk about the menopausal hormonal change, but what do you think was the factors that led to us starting to have more open conversation about this? Because to your point, this was not discussed. It was something that has, there's reasons we can talk about it. Definitely the discrimination component is still, I think, a very real factor for most women. And I know even women in my history, like talking to family members, even amongst themselves, they didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about it with your husband. You didn't really talk about it with other women, your friends. But now there's something that changed. What do you think that change was that made it something where it wasn't just comfortable to talk about in personal settings and private settings, but now it's something we're addressing in a public forum? Is this episode hitting a nerve? Are you facing complex people challenges and have tried leadership books, workshops, and the advice from everyone, and somehow it's still not working? Now imagine having a trusted leadership partner who understands your specific challenges and strengths. My one on one leadership program provides the support you need with a customized plan. If you'd like to learn more, click on the link in the show notes and book some time with me. I'll explain how it works. Now back to the show.
Two very specific things happened. In the UK, a particular personality um, went public with the symptoms that she was experiencing at the time and did what is always needed to have happen when anything has secrecy and shame shrouded around it, is that people communicate more clearly. So in the UK, that's what happened. This very public figure began to share her experiences. Here in Ireland, it was slightly different. We had a talk show host, a radio talk show host, and he took a phone call from a woman about her experience of menopause. And for a week afterwards, his entire show was flooded, literally flooded with calls from women, from doctors, from nurses, talking about the need for discussion and education, not just for regular folk, but also for medics on this topic. From that moment, it changed. Everything changed.
Wow. That's fascinating. I'm trying to think if there was something of a similar nature in the US, but no one specifically is coming to mind. I do, like I said, I do seem to think that, at least personally, I'll speak about my own story. So there's no shame here. I am approaching 50. And so I am definitely in the transition of some kind, as are many of my friends. And I think I want to say maybe it started with COVID, where we would start joking in COVID. Like it would start as a joke. I don't know if I'm having a hot flash or if I have COVID. Or, are these just, did I sleep poorly? Do I have frozen shoulder? Or, have I thrown my back out? Like there was all these like jokes around, is it menopause, perimenopause, or is it some other life catastrophe happening? But from that, it quickly rolled into, has anybody had this experience? Does anybody smell burning all the time? My God, my ears itch. And, like, I've gone to the doctors, but there's nothing in there, but man, my ears itch. So I feel like it, in a weird way, what started out as jokes turned into almost a communal symptom repository of, "Oh, I had that happen." It lasted for me about 2 weeks. This helps, this doesn't help. But one of the things that I'm most excited about is you're starting to see some health systems here creating menopausal clinics. So they're operated by doctors who are specific to women's health, because it is such a unique thing. Like many things, no two women are going to experience the menopausal journey in exactly the same way.
It is incredible that that is happening now. And we've been fortunate enough to have that happening here in Ireland for several years now. But in addition to that, regular GPs, general practitioners, we would call them, have also begun in most of their practices to have a specialist, somebody who is interested in that topic, who has done additional training to work with women in that area. Let me bring you back 20 years. So I'm 60. I was 60 this summer. I myself, at aged 40, had what I was describing as a collection of symptoms that, with my nurse hat on, I knew
Hmm.
were menopause. But way back then, 20 years ago, repeated visits to the doctor just got me your bloods are normal, you're too young to be in menopause. And it led me to the exploration of this particular topic and to do my own research and find out what was actually going on. Now, the reality is that I was in an early menopause, and I did go through menopause with very little input from the medical system, mostly because it just simply wasn't a thing. Perimenopause didn't exist. It was only menopause, and you needed to be much older for that. And I was 40, and I had a, 5-year-old daughter, so I couldn't possibly be in menopause. The reality is that I was. I was resourced enough and informed enough that I was able to find out what I needed to do, and to make sure I had my DEXA scans and to have the bloods done and to be able to support myself. But they were lonely years. I described them, those few years.
Yeah.
Because it does feel sometimes as though someone has pulled the plug. It does feel as though you were run over by a bus when you wake in the morning. It can mean that there are aches and pains all over, that you can't remember your colleague's name, even though she's been sitting opposite you for several years now. And all of these things, on a good day, you can roll with them. But if you have no idea what's really happening to you,
Yeah.
it can just lead to, you start to think, well, what's going on here? So these days, at least, there is that, I suppose, understanding that perimenopause can begin 8 to 10 years before menopause occurs. And I describe it that the symptoms are nebulous. So so
Mhm.
so they're, "Oh, I'm really tired." And then the next day I'm fine. Or I have aches and pains. Maybe I need an anti-inflammatory or something. I'm not sure what's wrong. Or, oh, it's hot. Or I'm not really sleeping well and I'm not sure what is happening. And any of the symptoms, including one of the big ones can be, I'm gaining weight, I'm eating the same, I'm going to the gym, I'm doing all the same things, I'm getting this midline weight. What's happening? They're very nebulous in the sense that it could be because you have a low iron count, it could be because your vitamin D levels are low, it could be that actually you have an underactive thyroid and you need a prescription for Eltroxin to put things right. So very often the symptoms we get, particularly in perimenopause, can be that vague, nebulous type that we sort of get on with or tolerate.
Yeah.
And it's only when we sit down and go, actually, when I look at this in total, I'm not able to deliver. I have a phrase that I used to say, I used to be able to take on the world and have fun doing it. And now, and sometimes that's what happens. And
Yeah.
that's particularly important to us when we're in the workplace. I mean, it
Yeah.
matters in life outside of work too, but it can be scary in at work, particularly if you have a significant role in your organization, particularly if considering escalating along in your career. And suddenly you have these symptoms that are beginning to make it difficult to perform at the level that you usually perform. That's
Mhm.
scary.
So I say this, and I laugh when I say this, but it's very serious. I understand now going through this why centuries ago they institutionalized some women, because you do some days feel crazy. I'm chuckling to myself as you were like listing off these things. As someone who prides myself, I am a well studied person. I'm always sharp on it, but the inability sometimes to think of a simple word, a very basic vocabulary word. To you, it's very nebulous. But when you're in a work situation and you're in a professional environment, and suddenly your brain just doesn't behave the way you've expected it to behave for your entire life, is an incredibly scary experience. When you suddenly can't maintain focus and, you can call it brain fog, but to get for people who maybe don't understand that, like your attention span is very difficult to maintain. You may start experiencing more anxiety, more depression, like your thoughts, your emotional state may flux in a way that you're not prepared for. My favorite is the one of you just experience rage out of nowhere, and it can disappear just as quickly as it came. You literally feel like your brain is almost working against you. And to your point, up until now, if we weren't having these discussions, you wouldn't know why this might be. No, you don't necessarily have a brain tumor. It could be perimenopause. Because that's where some people think. I think there must be something wrong with my brain. I must have a tumor. Am I about to have a stroke? Because that's how dysfunctional you start to feel about yourself. And that's why talking about what does that mean in the workplace is so significant, because we now exist in a society where most women work. We have to work. It's not an option. And we're not necessarily as progressive as the UK in a lot of ways, but many women don't have the leave. And if they have the vacation or the sick days, I know many women hold those for kids because they have children and they want to make sure they're available for the people that depend on them. And so that's why having you come on and talk about this, I thought was such a great, just such an amazing topic and an important topic, because I want women to feel more seen and more understood. And also what can we share with them about helping them navigate the workplace knowing this is happening? Because there's no hiding it. We're in it. We're in it, and we're riding the ride one way or the other. And so how do we help support each other? How do we take care of ourselves? And for those that are on the other side of the fence, what are some considerations for your colleagues that you see who maybe don't feel like them they may not feel like to you they're themselves. They're maybe a little different than you've experienced for years, and now suddenly you have a slightly different human in front of you. But yeah, that's so we can start wherever you like.
So the first thing I'm going to say is that when we have symptoms that impact us so fully throughout our body, and that's how the hormonal system, the whole endocrine system works in such a way that it really, um, it's the human body is incredible. Our hormonal system is incredible. It influences so much of our functioning in the world, um, that it really is important that, and I suggest that we do this every 5 years, every 1 year is ideal, but every 5 years certainly, is that if whoever is listening in here, if they just take 10 minutes and sit down and check in with themselves. Because you referenced the point about how women very often will hold that lead for others. Women very often will just keep going. They'll keep putting one foot in front of the other. But actually, it is important that we do take stock. If we're lucky enough to be alive, and that's how I view it, if we're lucky enough to be still alive at 40, at 45, at 50, at 55, at 60, and so on, we need to be checking in with ourselves to go, hold on a minute. Okay, so this is me now. How am I doing? What's working well? What's my energy like? What's my sleep like? How much time or energy do I have? And what sort of relaxation and fun have I? So just a general check-in. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. Where am I struggling? What's going on? Are there changes to my menstrual cycle? And for those that have the coil in, have things changed? Because what we forget sometimes is that if somebody has an IUD in place, you're still getting older. Your ovaries are still getting older if you're lucky enough to be alive. But I'm going to say, take 10 minutes
Yeah.
to check in with yourself. That's the first thing. Because I hate to break it to us, there isn't a queue of people lining up to go, how are you doing? Why don't you take some time there to look after you? And, that's, I would say, our job. We need to model well
Yes.
for ourselves, for our children if we have them, but for others that actually it's useful for me to stay in the driver's seat for my own health. So that's the first thing we do. And when we do that, then we can begin to know what we need to do to resource ourselves or support ourselves. In the workplace, I'm going to say, until it is a topic that is discussed, it's very often taboo. And I would often suggest that when you are sleeping well and energy is okay, it makes it easier to be able to tackle anything. So your self-care starts. That's the absolute starting point. After that, it becomes simple little things that you can do to create a movement, I'm going to say, within your workplace. If there's just one other woman in your workplace, have the conversation with her.
Mhm.
Find an ally, whether that's in the HR department or simply in the canteen where you're talking to somebody. Begin to find your group of people that will help you realize that you're not the only one. Because some
Mhm.
of the biggest struggles we have is under thinking we're the only one going through this. We're very fortunate here in Ireland. I work with countless corporates and even in the community, lots of government aided community events raising awareness about perimenopause and menopause, suggesting guidelines for how employers need to be responsible and how they can safeguard employee well-being during this particular time. And the point that keeps coming back again and again is that because the age group of women between that 40 and 55 globally is large, and very often these women are at middle to senior management in their
Mhm.
organizations. A lot of that level of expertise can be devastating for an organization. It is very strategic and wise to be considering how we actually manage this particular resource that we have in our staff. I also let you into a little secret. What I tend to do when I'm speaking with corporates as well is that I speak about hormonal health in the 40s and 50s for both men and women. Because although not a medical condition, andropause, an equivalent or similar experience in men where there is a declining level of testosterone in the body during those 2 decades can often lead to similar sort of symptoms: lack of drive, a loss of muscle strength, poor motivation, difficult focusing. And so sometimes when we make this human experience of being alive in our 40s and 50s, it can land a little easier because there's a buy-in that says, oh, okay, so that's happening to me. I notice that. It must be tough if it's happening to her too.
It's so funny that you say that because I have had this conversation with some male friends that they are experiencing things particularly related to lower testosterone and how that's affecting their ability to function. But it's so fascinating because even though both are not haven't historically not been talked about, I feel women are definitely treated differently and not in a positive sense because of their transition. And I had pulled up some stats before we met, and it was interesting because this actually came from the UK that they said, in tying back to what you were saying, that 28% of women were worried that menopause would make them look incapable to do their job. And when you think about how, to your point, the workforce of women in their 40s and 50s who are in this change at the leader level, the significant impact on any organization losing true institutional knowledge simply because we're not able to support each other in the right way. So I would love to hear from you because you work with corporations, you have helped them institute amazing guidelines. What are some things that, whether you own the business or whether you are a leader of a team, what are some things that we can do from a leadership perspective to help support our female employees who are in this season of life?
I'm going to say the very first thing I suggest that an organization does is have some education for everyone. They may do it about other health topics too, but that it's really useful to, I call it, have a chat about perimenopause and menopause and debunk the myths and help people understand some of the challenges and also explore the absolute potential that is still there. And I'm going to say being only uncovered in women at this stage of life when supported properly. Education, I think, helps everything because we know more, we can do better, we can make better choices, we can know how to resource ourselves as employees, but also then we can know that we are saying inappropriate things or being inconsiderate with our demands, perhaps, or inappropriate with our objections to somebody going to the bathroom a lot on certain days when we know well that women may be experiencing flooding, which
Mhm.
is tricky to manage. But actually, some workplaces would have, frowned a little at the amount of times that she's had to go to the bathroom. When we know more, we understand more, and then we can begin to shape a better culture and a safer place for all employees and the employers.
Yeah, my one of my thoughts when you were saying that is even just asking if people are okay. Because I constantly think about how inconsistent the symptoms can be, as I say, through this season of life. And if you see someone who is not acting or behaving in a way you know them to be, is it privately just checking in with them and making it okay to have that conversation? I would love to think that in the US, we're progressive enough that we would have that level of education in a work environment. I'm still a little doubtful that's probably the case, but I think what we can do as an individual and as an individual in a leadership position, if you really care about your team the way we say we do, is educate yourself, ask good questions, and candidly notice your team because sometimes what may appear to be a performance problem is really related to a health problem uh, that you wouldn't know about if you just didn't ask, because maybe someone's too scared to tell you the truth, that this is just a rough patch that they're going through and where maybe the cause might be. Because I can tell you, I mean, I'm in the HRT camp, and I know many of my friends, the spectrum of us that are like how we're tackling this time is very different. Some people have tried HRT and it worked very well. Some of people I'm aware of, it did not go well at all. There had to be some tweaking, and then some had to get off of it completely. Some of them are just bravely doing it on their own. And, all power to them. Whatever makes it good for you, whatever feels like the right decision for you. But what I can say is it's still one of these very inconsistent things. Even today, even though I'm doing the HRT, woo woo, and that's hormone replacement therapy for anybody listening and not knowing what that means. Um, so I'm just helping my body basically ease into where I'm ultimately going. And but even with that, I still have good days. I still have bad days. I still have what I like to call good moments or bad moments. There's still times I cannot think of a word to save my life. And then within like an hour later, it is there. It's the funniest thing, and I choose to find humor in it more now. But it's very hard if you're not talking about it and accepting you're not around people who will accept that that might just be a quirk of the day, not, "Oh gosh, Kim's not performing the way she should. She's not at the level I expect her to be." So it's interesting to me that that's where you start is with education. Um, I think it's a great suggestion, and I encourage if you're not going to get that in your environment, seek it out for yourself. Um, how can people go ahead? Sorry.
Well, the piece is, even if we are not going to roll out an educational program at work, perhaps at the end of whether it's a company newsletter that you send to your employees or a monthly email that gives the stats of how the company is doing or something, you can put a link in there, not just about perimenopause or menopause, but a link to a, you know, reputable, renowned information source on a variety of different topics. And you just have to look out at the office around you to know perhaps the demographic, the age and stage, life stages that people are at to know. And that even doing that will begin to shift the experience that you're aware. We're very fortunate. Lots of organizations will have identified what they sometimes call as menopause champions or menopause touch point persons. So they'll be somebody who has had some information or training. Their job really is to signpost to experts, but it does mean that somebody, an employee, can go to this person and be signposted to know where to get information or perhaps how to manage a tricky time, so that they can continue to deliver at their best. One of the sessions that I deliver is that it takes more than a patch to thrive. And the reason for that
It's
is
true.
it's true. We sometimes think, oh, hold on, let me just slap this patch on here and maybe I have an IUD in as well, or maybe I'm rubbing gel on it, or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
if we're lucky enough to still be alive, I keep saying that, but it's true. If we're lucky enough to still be alive at 45, 50, 55, we need to be thinking, well, how am I going to do the second half of life? How do I want to be? What words will I use to describe myself, my body? Do I want it to be strong, flexible, fit? My mind, sharp, curious, clear, strategic? My personality and my spirit, if you want to call it that. I want to be fun loving, compassionate for both me and others. They're just words that I'm updating on a regular basis, that I say, how do I want to do the second half of life? When we begin to look at menopause, midlife, as this opportunity that we get to take stock
Mm.
and to decide, in this enchantress warrior stage, as I discussed in my TEDx talk about how menopause will change your life.
Yeah.
There's a period of time during perimenopause and menopause when, we sort of are a bit done with some of the BS stuff. We're not going to tolerate it anymore. And we're able to be clearer about what we want. We're able to have better boundaries. We're able to ask more distinctly for what we need. That's tapping into that warrior piece that emerges at this time. But there's also the other side of that coin, which is the enchantress, that part of us that perhaps had to put away our dreams years ago. It's the lighter, fun, curious, happy, compassionate person that says, oh, look, there might be some of these stuff I need to stop. And actually, the things that I want to start. When we take the time to check in with ourselves, educate ourselves about what's happening, and then get the resources we need, and realize that this is more than just a medical condition as such. This is a transition. I mean, the old fashioned word, that going through the change, that
Hmm.
was so perfect. That's what this is. It is a time to update. How have I been doing? What am I good with? What do I want to bring forward into the second half of my life? And what do I need to help me do that? It is a powerful time once we get the supports that we need to be able to take on the world and have fun doing it.
Well, and that ties back to where we started, which is you have to take care of yourself. It's the same analogy we talk about in when a lot of client work that I do is when you're on the airplane and they say, in times of crisis, you have to put the mask on yourself first because you're not helping anyone else if you're dead. Like, sorry, you can't help anybody when you completely are incapacitated. And so I love that your message is one of self-care, empowerment. Like this because there is so much shame wrapped up in this time of life because you are getting older and the world looks at you differently. But what you say and what I love the most is it's also a moment where you get to redefine who you are, who you want to be, and how do you want to how do you want to challenge this next stage of life? It's actually very much about controlling your narrative and controlling your journey and not allowing it to be outsourced to anyone else in case it may have been. women, you know, 'cause you do talk about this. So if you haven't heard her TED Talk, I'm gonna link it in the notes. You gotta go check it out. It's really good. She's really funny. Um, I loved it. Um, but it's that idea that you get to kind of take reins of your life, and maybe this is a moment for you to pump the brakes, and if again, referencing pivot or make a change in who you are and what you wanna be. Even if you stay in the same job and do the same company, you can still choose to approach things in a different manner.
We live in a world where youth and being young and looking young and staying young is prized. The reality is, if we are older, we're still alive, which means we're not dead, which is a pretty good thing in my book. I know it's obvious, but I'm going to say it anyhow because, we talk sometimes about self care, and I use the words and I really don't like them because they sound like bubble baths, and that's not what I mean.
Yes.
I mean, it is time to say, hold on a minute here. I am alive. That's
Yeah.
pretty important, especially to me. How am I going to do me for the next half?
Yeah.
That's a really, really important question. And it's not always, what do I have to start doing? I mean, there may be some stuff we want to start doing. For a lot of us, it's about, what do I need to stop doing? Actually, I'm not doing that anymore. I reference it, the martyr mommy. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we're not doing that anymore. And I'm very fortunate to still be alive. That means not dead. And at 60, I'm fitter, stronger, happier, more boundaried, and I like myself so much more than when I was younger. That's important because so many of us, for whatever trauma reasons, maybe have a mean internal critic. We get to update our story in menopause. We get to decide what we're going to believe for ourselves and what we're going to help create for ourselves for the second half. Because none of us are getting out of here alive. And we are more able to influence it than we know for the simple reason we can influence in here.
I just wanna say, if for everyone out there listening, go connect with Ashley on LinkedIn, and because when you are the epitome of practice what you preach, like, I love every update you ever provide. So, she has a motorcycle, and she goes riding in full leather, and is living life by your terms. You are, because 'cause I'm pretty sure you probably weren't doing that at 20. If I remember correctly, you were not. Um, and I constantly think to myself, how freaking cool is that? Like, I agree with you. And I love that. I think it's important that we change this concept of self care from something that is very performative to something that is really meaningful. Because when I think of self care, it's what do I have? Am I nourishing my body? Am I nourishing my mind? Um, how I think, and to your point, how am I thinking about myself? Who am I surrounding myself with? Do I feel supported? Are there changes I need to make so that I can be closer to this idea of who I would like to be? And guess what? Those dreams can change. And I can tell you, if you know me throughout my life, my dreams have changed quite significantly over time. And that's good. And that means I'm going to probably have to change the plan in my life to help accommodate these new goals and ideas that I have. So I agree with you. I feel like the self-care industry got usurped by spa days and to your point, bubble baths and, you know, it's not just about protein shakes, ladies, and the weighted vests. Like it's so I feel like you're laughing because you know what I'm talking about. You can't go anywhere now without seeing women wearing weighted vests everywhere. But I like the idea of having a much more meaningful interpretation of self-care as something including deep work on yourself. That I think is huge. I love that.
My background is nursing before I was pharmaceuticals and then holistic medicine and then coaching and all of that. But I'm a very practical sort of girl. Uh, so this is an inside job first. And I don't mean navel gazing. The question that can really help, and certainly for me was one of the ones that helped me shift things significantly, is how much accommodating am I endlessly doing?
Hmm.
I'm going to accommodate an awful lot. And because we live in a world where we share space and with others, we do need to accommodate. But sometimes we spend a lifetime accommodating and neglecting our own needs, our own dreams, our own wishes, compromising our own values, compromising whether or not we're introverted and need lots of solitude, compromising that we know we feel better after a walk, but somehow we end up staying home to do some housework. So for me, that question that we can check in with ourselves and go, actually, am I being my own best friend? No navel gazing involved, but am I being my own best friend here? Am I endlessly postponing when it will be time for me to have a say in my own life? Yeah. Then when we answer that, we can have transformative self-care and spa days, weighted vests and bubble bath if you're into them.
I think that is a perfect place to pause this conversation. Oh my goodness. Ashleigh, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show, for squeezing me in before you go on this amazing life journey. If you want to know what that's about, I'm telling you, you got to go follow her on LinkedIn. That's how this works. Like, I'm teeing it up, but she is about to go on an amazing adventure and squeezed me in there so that we could have this amazing conversation to share with you. The work you do, Ashleigh, is so important. It's so amazing. And I'm so grateful our paths have crossed because you continue to just influence me and like inspire me to think deeper and to be bolder as I continue my own little journey on this big change.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very fortunate. I love my work. I love the human body. Humans are incredible. And sometimes we just need to remember that about ourselves. And it helps us believe a better story or the second half.
Thanks so much. I've got two things before I let you go. One, if you've ever gotten any value from the show, please leave a 5-star review. It really helps and absolutely makes my day. The second thing is if you have any thoughts you'd like to share with me, please shoot me an email at podcast@KimberlyJBenoit.com. I'd love to hear from you. All right, see you in the next episode.